Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new set from Takara Tomy for Jurassic World Rebirth, and as you can see, we have our very first version of the D-Rex now from Takara Tomy. It's been a little bit since Rebirth had released, and the official toy line from Takara Tomy had released as well, and there was, unfortunately, no D-Rex at the time, but we now have this version. Now, this isn't like your standard mainline version of Takara Tomy. This is Takara Tomy Arts, which is basically, as far as these figures go, these are like, those Gashapon, like, kind of capsule-type figures and stuff that you would get in, like, claw machines and stuff like that. And as you can see in this set, you've got some pretty cool species. You've got a Spinosaurus, you have Ember the Tyrannosaurus, and you also have the D-Rex. And I honestly think these are so much nicer than any of the older ones that I have acquired, the older Jurassic World kind of capsule figures. I did actually just recently review a set that included a Tyrannosaurus, the Indominus, and the Indoraptor, and that set was nowhere near as nice as what we have with these ones. So it is nice to see that the newer figures have been updated drastically compared to the older ones. So I'm going to go ahead, pull them all out, and then bring each one in one by one. So we'll begin with what I think is probably the weakest link of the bunch, and that would be Ember the Tyrannosaurus, unfortunately. One thing I will say straight away is the colors, although they look really nice on the figure, don't replicate the way we see him in the films. So again, we have kind of like a darker grayish version here from Takara Tomy. The sculpt kind of does, like the head sculpt does look a little bit off, I think, but it does have the bulkiness of the throat. It has the more correct sort of arms, although this one looks like he's really trying his hardest to show off his muscles. But again, it does have kind of that newer version of the T-Rex sort of a look, but at the same time, again, not perfectly screen accurate. But you can see the skin texture in the face looks okay, definitely a little muted compared to many of the other versions of Ember that are out there. A lot of the Ember figures have some of the best fine detail that you will ever see, and at least as far as Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurs go in the toy line, this one not so much. You can see it's pretty much standard stuff, fairly muted and generic sort of detail. We have a very dark gray for the head. You can also see kind of like a light grayish tone for the lower jaw. There is an articulated jaw, at least, and inside the mouth we've got the tongue in there. You can see a nice pinkish tone for the tongue. And then actually the same thing for the upper side of the inside of the mouth, which is fairly decent. The teeth are all kind of okay looking as far as the sculpt. They're fairly small, kind of rounded, pretty much what you usually see from Takara Tomy, and they are a little bit sloppy as far as the paintwork. They have kind of like an off-white for the coloration of the teeth, but the jaw works okay. You also have a yellow eye with a black pupil, and the eye as well is a little bit sloppy. This one, the eye is kind of looking back more so than forward, so that as well looks a little bit awkward. But as you move down into the body, again, you do have that bulkiness to the throat area, which is something that, is partial to males in the Jurassic World and Jurassic Park franchise. But you have some nice skin wrinkles and stuff. You also, again, have the darker tones. We continue on with the darker gray, but as we move down into the body, we actually start to lighten the gray a little bit, and once you hit this point, you can kind of see how the darker gray falls along the back and super smoothly and very subtly stripes down through the body, which I think looks really nice on the figure. We also have the arms that become kind of lighter here as you move down, kind of a lighter gray leading into the arms. The claws are unpainted, but it kind of almost looks like they tried to kind of just like airbrush some paint over it, but they're not really all that well done. You will see all sorts of seams as you move through the figure because the figure is actually unassembled when you get it. You have to pop the neck in, and the neck actually kind of makes it look like it might have some form of neck articulation. It does not. So here we only have jaw articulation. The arms do not articulate, I don't think. No. So, oh yeah, of course they don't. They have this kind of like way that they've been applied. So no articulation in the arms, but you do get some more articulation as we move through. You can see the rib cage. You can also see some darker grays that have been nicely airbrushed in the rib cage area. Super smooth transition down to the lighter tone of the underbelly of the T-Rex, and I think the detail down here does look okay. It's not too bad overall. As we move back, you do actually have leg articulation, which can go forward and back. As you move down through the legs, you can kind of get a sense of the musculature in both the thigh and calf. The detail, again, is okay, but still pretty muted overall. And then as you move down, you'll see the same thing in the foot sculpt again. You know, kind of, you can make out like scoots down the toes, but not really all that well. Again, very muted when it comes to the detail, which is pretty common for these type of capsule figures. You do have the claws sculpted out, but again, unpainted. And then you move up into the tail, and here in the tail, I really like the way that they very nicely striped the darker tone down through the tail. And I think that looks really, really good. You can also see the lighter tone kind of overtakes the tail as you lead out, and then the darker grays sort of just stripe through, which again is really nice. You do have a little bit more articulation, which is actually kind of decent articulation, because we have this sort of articulation where we don't have those weird ball joints that you usually see from Takara Tomy. So you can kind of articulate the tail in a little bit of a smoother way, but some ways, like over here, you can see it kind of looks a little bit ugly. But if we turn it this way, it seems to be a little bit smoother, like it doesn't look so bad. But again, it would have helped if the darker gray was here on the insides of the joints. It definitely would have helped for the overall visual, and you know, when you articulate those areas, it wouldn't have shown up so awfully right there. But again, when you look at it from this side, it looks okay. The biggest difference over here is going to be the fact that the leg is taking a step forward. Other than that, the figure is pretty straightforward, with the tail just slightly curving in our direction. But again, the paintwork, although not screen accurate, is actually pretty nice for that. Then we've got ourselves the D-Rex, and the D-Rex does look really good. Again, the detail on this is just about as muted as we saw on the Tyrannosaurus, but because this one is a lighter coloration, you can really see the detail better on the D-Rex. And as you move through the head area, you can see the head sculpt looks pretty good, definitely capturing the likeness of the D-Rex. Kind of makes me wish that we had a D-Rex in the main line of the Takara Tomy figures, and hopefully we will at some point now that this has been released. But we can see the teeth are sculpted, the mouth is in a closed position. There is no articulated jaw for the D-Rex, unfortunately. There is a little bit of paintwork added to the teeth, but you can see it is fairly sloppy. We do have the eyes painted with a just straight up black tone of color. But the D-Rex does look pretty cool, honestly. Like, when it comes to a Takara Tomy version, I think they did a decent job. As you move up to the top of the head, you do have those sort of like bumps on the top of the head. I guess they're like scoots up here on the head of the D-Rex that move along. And there's a little bit of variation of color, and you will see that as you move through, there is some very subtle variation of color that looks really good, kind of like a striping as you move down, which you can really see from this point. But again, it's really subtle with the way it's been added. We can also take note to the spinal column, really nicely shown off on the top of the figure. As you move down, you of course have those smaller arms held there into the body. You also have the larger arms as well, which again look pretty nice. And they kind of gave this one some paintwork for the claws. You can see they basically just airbrushed some color over the claw area, so it's like kind of got paintwork, but not really nicely. You'll see the same thing for those smaller arms there held into the body. Some pretty decent detail on the underside, as well as a darker tone that's been applied to the underside of the throat area of the D-Rex. Arm articulation, you can move forward and back, and of course it's the same for both arms. I'm curious if these can move, because it almost, oh yeah, they can. I was going to say it kind of looks like they can. If I could just get this arm out of the way. So yeah, you can move at least a little bit. You can basically swivel these smaller arms there on the inside of the D-Rex, which is definitely nice to have a little extra articulation there. But as you move back, again, you've got some more of that really subtle variation of color that's been added. You've got more decent looking detail. Again, it's not overly impressive, but you can see with the lighter tone, it does shine fairly decently. Moving back into the legs, you've got the musculature, of course, nicely highlighted, the kneecap and everything. No real variation of color moving down the leg, and as you move down into the foot sculpt, again, it's about as muted detail-wise as we had seen on the T-Rex. You can't really see like scoots down the toes or anything, even though it kind of should have that. You could sort of make it out, but not really nicely. You've got the toes sculpted out in a decent sort of a way. Again, the claws looking all right with, again, a little bit more of that color added to them. And then as you move up, you do have the tail sculpted pretty nicely as well. And of course, some more of that really nice subtle striping as you move out. I really do like the paintwork of this. I think the paintwork is actually really nice. And if they release a mainline version of this creature, I think the paintwork should look pretty much as it does on this one. That would definitely be really cool. But you you do also have a little more articulation. Again, you've got leg articulation forward and back, and you also have tail articulation, which can go left and right. But again, it's got an awkwardness to it, no doubt about that. That's one thing that for some reason it doesn't seem like Takara Tomy can really capture is articulation with their figures. Like, no matter what route they go, it always has an awkwardness to it, whether it be the ball joints or this. Like, now you don't see those odd ball joint seams and stuff, but it still looks a bit awkward. Again, this figure was unassembled, so you see super obvious seams. Another spot here in the neck where the seam is really obvious, but doesn't actually have any form of neck articulation because you just basically pop these figures together. But it is a really cool D-Rex. I definitely like this one a lot. And then, maybe my favorite figure in the entire set is the Spinosaurus, because this Spinosaurus is significantly nicer than their mainline versions of the Spinosaurus, if you ask me. So the head sculpt looks pretty nice. Again, I don't know if I'd say it's absolutely picture perfect to the way we see it in Rebirth, but it looks pretty decent. You do have an articulated jaw, and once you open the mouth, you've got the tongue sticking out like pretty straight out. I don't know if it's like meant to be that way or if maybe it just came up inside the mouth. I can push the tongue, but it doesn't really move. It does look a little bit awkward, but it does at the same time kind of have the look of it letting out a vocalization. But we can see the teeth are sculpted pretty much as you would expect them to be from Takara Tomy. They are, again, a little bit sloppy when it comes to the paintwork. There's also a pink tone there for the inside of the mouth, which is pretty standard stuff for Takara Tomy. You do have a little bit of a lighter brown for the lower jaw as well as you move along, which you can see. Again, darker brown for the head, a yellow eye with a black pupil. The pupil isn't perfectly placed. Definitely looks a little bit better over here on the other side. As you move back, you start to pick up kind of like a yellowish tone, like a light yellow for the underside of the throat that moves along the underside of the Spinosaurus, as well as a brighter kind of more vibrant yellow that starts to show up here on the back of the head of the dinosaur. And as we move down, again, the detail on this looks pretty nice. I think it actually looks better on this than it did on both the Tyrannosaurus and D-Rex. As we move back, though, the paintwork here of the body of this one is fantastic compared to the mainline version. This honestly makes the mainline version look horrible in comparison because the paintwork is so smooth and so nice and naturally applied. And even in the darker areas of the body, you can see like variation of lighter and darker shades of browns and stuff, which looks really, really nice. You can also take note to how nice the scales look. Again, they're not incredible, but they're definitely a little bit more vibrant on this figure than we had seen on the others. We've still got those sort of scoots moving along down under the sail, and as you move up into the sail, the paintwork of the sail as well is gorgeous. Really smooth paintwork when it comes to those stripes there in the sail, again battling back and forth with the dark brown and the yellowish tones. I think that all looks really, really well done. Moving down into the arm is a little bit bulky, of course, but that's just because these figures are pretty much always sort of like that, but I think the arm looks okay. You've got the muscle definition, the elbow and everything, the fingers sculpted out decently, and again, the claws don't really have any paintwork. They kind of look like, again, just basically they were hit with an airbrush, so it is a little bit inconsistent from one side to the other. You do have arm articulation, which is nice, again, forward and back. And then as you move back into the legs, you can, again, see the muscle definition of the leg. We can also see a really smooth transition from the brown to the lighter tone of the underside. Again, you have articulation in the legs, just like you had on the arms, forward and back. And the legs are basically just a dark brown the entire way through. As you lead down to the foot sculpt, though, you can see some nice webbing between the toes, which of course is a nice touch for the figure. And then as we move back up into the tail, that nice paddle-like tail, you can see these areas start to kind of separate because the dinosaur's, again, just basically assembled once it gets here, so you just pop the pieces on and that's how you put it together. But that also means that the pieces come apart pretty easily, unfortunately. But as you move out, again, the paintwork of the tail looks great. I love the way that they've applied this really nice, very smooth striping throughout. Those gorgeous, vibrant yellows as you lead along, and the detail in the tail is honestly some of the best I think I've seen on any of these figures. It does look pretty crisp and pretty nice, and again, you do have articulation in the tail. You can articulate it in two separate spots, so you can really, again, make it go far if you want, but it's going to look super awkward then. But if you just go, you know, a little bit of a curve, it doesn't look so bad, especially if you look at it from this side. Well, we have to push that back down. But it does look a little bit better once you look at it from the more dominant side, I guess. But again, not the greatest articulation in the world, as I just pushed that piece out of the way. But when you look at it over here, it looks pretty much just as nice over here as it did on the first side. I really, really love the paintwork and everything of this one. A little inconsistent when it comes to the yellow on the top of the head, but it is by far, in my opinion, better than the mainline versions of the Spino from Takara Tomy. As far as the size goes on the Spino, for a length, you are looking at about 6 3/4 inches, or a little over 17 centimeters, and then height-wise to the top of the sail in the position it's currently in, a little bit under 2.5 inches, or just a hair over 6 centimeters. If we move the Spino out of the way and bring in the T-Rex, you will see the T-Rex at about, actually, you know what, I'm going to have to turn it around because the tail curves in this direction. You're going to see the T-Rex at about a little over 5.5 inches, heading toward, actually close to 5 3/4 inches, or around 14.5 centimeters, and then for a height about 1 3/4 inches, or 4.5 centimeters, and then for the D-Rex, lengthwise about 4.5 inches, or 11.5 centimeters, and then height-wise, just a hair under 2 inches, or 5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our little Takara Tomy Jurassic World Rebirth set here, and you can see again they are all pretty small. So looking at them here, you would think that they'd be pretty much in the same size range as standard Takara Tomy stuff, and they are on one hand, but when it comes to comparing them with their mainline counterparts, as you can see, they're not quite the same, because on the right is the mainline version of Ember, on the left is the new version from the capsule type figures, and obviously the mainline version is a good bit larger. It's also a lot more screen accurate than the capsule version, but again, obviously the sizes aren't quite the same between the capsules and the standard mainline figures. It does get a bit closer though once you look at the Spinos. The Spinos aren't so far off from each other, and the capsule version actually could fit in quite nicely with the mainline versions, even the same style of articulation in the tail actually, so it could fit in pretty decently with the others. But as you can see again, they're pretty similar in size, with the capsule version maybe being slightly larger actually, but if at all, it's just barely. Still, again, so much nicer paintwork on the capsule version compared to the mainline. And then we'll just bring in the D-Rex next to the Spino, because as I mentioned, there is no mainline D-Rex so far, so hopefully there will be at some point, but just in case you wanted an idea of the size of the D-Rex next to the others here, like the Spino and, mainline stuff from Takara Tomy, you can see that the D-Rex is a little bit on the smaller side. So when it comes to the Takara Tomy capsule type Jurassic World figures, these are by far the best that I have acquired so far from Takara Tomy, which is a good sign for the future. But like when I run back to all of the other capsule figures, there's been some pretty decent ones, especially when it comes to like the stagnant models that they had released of like the Raptors and everything like that. Those were pretty good. But when it comes to the articulated style kind of capsule figures like this, these are definitely the best. And, I wouldn't say super high quality, but they're the highest quality so far that I've seen of these type of figures. It is just, again, super cool to now finally have a D-Rex from Takara Tomy, and I think they did a really good job on the sculpt of this one. It seems like it's pretty darn screen accurate overall, which again gives me high hopes for a actual mainline version of the D-Rex, and if they do create one, how good it'll actually look, because this one looks pretty nice, and the paintwork again is pretty well done for being, like a standard kind of mass-produced figure. I think they did a nice job of actually applying a little variation of color, making it look as it does on screen, and also quite natural and smooth paintwork overall, so definitely a plus for that one. The Spino as well is fantastic, and it's kind of a toss-up between the D-Rex and Spino as to which one is my favorite here, but I think the Spinosaurus is absolutely gorgeous. Sculpt-wise, paint-wise, everything on that is fantastic, and by far one of my favorite Jurassic World Rebirth Spinosaurus figures that are out on the market right now. Like, I just really, really like this figure. And again, the sculpt looks really good when it comes to the detail. I would say better on the Spino than any of the other two. And then the T-Rex is unfortunately the, I would say the most lackluster overall. It's just really not all that great, and I don't think it captures the likeness of Ember all that well. The detail is very muted. The paintwork doesn't really look like it does on screen, so You know, the mainline version is significantly nicer of the T-Rex than we have here, but it's still an okay addition to the Jurassic World Rebirth line. So if you are interested in these, you can purchase them on, you know, like eBay, Mercari, places like that. It seems to be the only place that I know of to really find them. Again, these are like capsule figures you get in like claw machines and stuff, so it's not like any stores that I would think are actually selling these. Maybe AliExpress you might be able to find them, but, you know, it's not like any, you know, standard retail stores will have them. So if you are interested, check around. Maybe you can find them. I will include a link in the description to where I purchased them on eBay, and if that listing is no longer available, I'll find the cheapest listing I can. So check the link in the description or search around yourself. Pick them up if you want them, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.